Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Iconic Freedom, The Formula. Here we set a standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and your outcomes and everything that follows. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. So when I talk about the formula, we talk about that periodic chart that you see on the various websites that this is posted on, where you create those elements that come together and bring harmony to your life. And if one of those elements in your life is not working, then you extract it and you reevaluate it and, again, bring that harmony to your life. So on today's episode, I want to talk about seeing the pattern, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And what is the pattern that I'm talking about? And I'm talking about the pattern of our choices. So last week we talked about simple observation. Reality doesn't care. Reality responds. Reality isn't waiting for our permission, and it doesn't pause while you debate it or argue with it. It simply continues responding to our choices. So that naturally, it led me to another question, which is, well, what makes it possible to actually see reality? And not to believe something or to adopt somebody else's philosophy. I remember this guru guy one time, he was going to give people knowledge, whatevs. But to genuinely see the patterns that have been there all along. Because once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it, right? Because think about an optical illusion. At first, you only see one image. Then someone points something out, and suddenly you see something that you couldn't see before. The image didn't change, but your observation did. I don't know if you've seen that picture. It looks like an hourglass, and you keep looking at it, and then all of a sudden it looks like a woman. And what's really funny is it's the same picture, but your perspective changed. I've always thought about that, and I always thought, that's such a weird thing that the mind does. But then once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? Or think about like if you're riding a bicycle, because once you understand how to balance yourself on a bike, you never return to not understanding it. I mean, maybe you're a little rusty at it, but then pretty quickly you're there. Nothing about gravity changed, right? Your relationship with it did. Reality works, I think, much in the same way. Patterns don't create reality, they reveal it. Science didn't create the stars. I say that they reduce the atmospheric distortion. And they build better telescopes. They remove the noise from the signal. The stars were always there. They simply became easier to observe. And I actually think that our lives work the same way. I wrote this down a few weeks ago, that reality has always been presenting itself all along. And the question isn't, how do I create clarity? I think the question is, what prevents me from seeing clearly? Because over the years, I've come to think of it as, like layers. Stories, assumptions, presumptions, expectations, fear, pride, shame, old adaptations, beliefs, I think, that we never examined. Everything we've accumulated that stands between us and comprehensive observation. Around here, I simply call it schmutz. And, it isn't the past that clouds our vision. It's everything we've continued adding to the past. All the explanations and justifications, all the blame, all the identities that we've built around these old choices that we've made. And I think the greatest act of honesty isn't admitting that something happened. I mean, I think most people can get to that. I lost the relationship, I made a mistake, I hurt someone, I was hurt. Those are events. I think a deeper question is, how did I participate? Not how much was my fault, because the participation isn't about condemnation. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about observation. Responsibility asks, what was mine? And accountability asks, what resulted from what was mine? And I say that acknowledgement will ask, can I honestly accept that? Because I think something remarkable happens when we do. I think that acknowledgement doesn't change reality, it cleans the lens through which reality is observed. So think about your if you wear glasses, or, even if you wear contacts or whatever. So eventually, like, fingerprints begin collecting on the lenses, and then there's dust and smudges and life, right? And sometimes you take them off and you intentionally breathe on them for a brief moment. They become even foggier, but because you're preparing to remove what was accumulated, then you wipe the lens clean. You put them back on. The world didn't change, but your vision did. And I think that our lives work much the same way. I think every honest acknowledgement is another cleaning of the lens. And once the lens becomes a little clearer, patterns begin appearing that were always there. The beginner, sees isolated events. This, that, this. But I think the observer, I would say the experienced observer, sees recurring patterns. One relationship, another disappointment, another conflict. See what I mean? At first they seem unrelated, and then one day you begin seeing the common thread. And it's not because reality had changed, but because your observation of it did. I've often said that all of our choices tell the story of which direction we're moving. Every choice moves us toward greater distortion or toward greater clarity, toward another story or toward reality, toward defending ourselves or moving towards becoming honestly acquainted with ourselves. You have a choice to comprehensively observe yourself, and a choice to allow yourself to know yourself, even in the darkest moments, especially there, because it's what remains unexamined that continues participating in the choices that we make today. I'm going to say that again. What remains unexamined continues participating in the choices that we make today. You choose to ignore it. You choose to ignore reality. So how can you be making choices in reality if you're ignoring what was in the past and how it impacts you? Reality cannot respond to the choices we refuse to acknowledge. But I think that the moment we comprehensively say, yes, that part was mine, I think something changes. Not reality, but our participation in it and the ownership of it. And reality responds. That's the reason the formula isn't about becoming someone different. It's about continually refining observation. And it's not toward perfection, but it's toward increasingly accurate information. Reality is, to me, it's always and already elegant. I think our endeavor is simply to remove enough distortion to recognize its elegance. And I think once you begin seeing those patterns, you'll discover something wonderful. You can't unsee them. And not because you have adopted a new belief, because you've become a more comprehensive observer. And reality has been patiently waiting there, although that's a projection. Reality is just being projection. Reality is just being itself, not a projection. But reality has been there the entire time. So then another question came up to me in the middle of the night. How do I see reality? And my thought is, and see if this resonates for you, by honestly acknowledging my participation in creating my own history. Again, reality has been presenting itself all along. Reality is already elegant. Our work, our endeavor is simply to remove enough of the distortion, enough of the schmutz to recognize its elegance and how beautiful it is and how beautiful it participates with nature. And you get on that magic carpet and you fly. Okay, so hit that like button if you would, share it with your family and friends. You never know how it might support them in their journey. All the fun links are below, including my new website, along with the links to my books, Iconic Freedom, The Formula, and The Christmas Cookie, a collection of stories that gently reflect the recurring patterns of ordinary human life, and they remind us that the smallest moments often reveal the greatest truths. Thank you for joining me, and remember, let each care for self, and all will be cared for. Have a great week.